Hello, I'm Eric Smith, and I'm seeking your generous support to fund this legal education and legal advocacy project for social justice. And the way this project works is that I have written a book, which you can see here, and this book makes legal knowledge simple and graphical so that everyone can gain an understanding of almost whatever legal uh, principles or legal situations or other legal crimes, for example, that they may be interested in knowing more about. So as an example, here's larceny. Larceny, we can read the definition. Larceny is the trespassory taking and carrying away of the tangible personal property of another with the intent to permanently deprive that person of their property. Now, that's a textual definition, and you can see here that there's a graphical uh, portrayal of the crime of larceny in order to better understand it. The way the graph works is that there's two bubbles, and the bubble is labeled as defendant. These are elements that the defendant has committed or holds within them. And so what the bubbles tell us, if we look at the top of the bubble, that tells us the mental aspect that the defendant has. And the bottom of the bubble tells us those physical actions that the defendant uh, may or may not have committed. In this case, larceny involves, mentally it involves trespassory intent, and physically it involves the taking of property. And those are the things that the defendant has committed. Further, the defendant needs to have the intent to permanently deprive the victim of their property. And these are the fundamentals of larceny here. Now, where this graphical legal education becomes important, of course, is when we look at the varieties of larceny, or in other situations, a variety of other crimes or other legal situations. So, with the basis of larceny, we have different types of larceny. And so here we have larceny and related crimes. The first one at the top here is robbery. In order to commit robbery, the defendant must have the intent to commit larceny, and further, they must physically use force or threats. And the arrow here tells us that those force or threats go against the victim, and the victim doesn't have to commit any action or have any mental state whatsoever. The crime of robbery is committed when the defendant has this mental state and commits these actions. So here we have a variety of larceny, which is robbery. And then we go up on to other varieties of larceny. The next one is embezzlement. Here, the bubbles representing the victim and the defendant have been turned around, because the first thing that needs to be committed for the crime of embezzlement to have been committed is for the victim to have transferred possession uh, to the defendant of the victim's property. The defendant then has to have committed these elements in order to be guilty of embezzlement. First, mentally, they must have fraudulent intent, and secondly, they must convert the property of the victim into their own or into some other form of property which is inaccessible to the victim. And those are the elements of embezzlement. A further variety of larceny is false pretenses. In order to be guilty of false pretenses, the defendant must have committed these elements. First of all, though, the victim needs to have done something and caused title to pass to the defendant. Now, the victim will usually only pass title to the defendant when the defendant commits these actions. They misrepresent themselves. The defendant misrepresents themselves or the situation with intent to defraud the victim, and this fraudulent intent and misrepresentation causes title to pass to the defendant, who is shown in the right-hand side bubble. So The point of this demonstration is to show very quickly that a crime such as larceny and its three varieties are here clearly shown and very quickly shown, very demonstratable to a victim perhaps. Um, and this makes the law clear to victims so that they can be certain that a crime has perhaps been committed upon them, and to know exactly what crime has been committed upon them, and therefore to be able for the victim to be able to enter places such as the courtroom with the certainty that a certain crime has been committed against them, instead of being caught up in legal proceedings or other legal procedures that leave the victim with a sense of uncertainty as to what has happened, or whether a crime can be proven, or what sort of damages can be recovered. So the point of this is legal education for everyone. And what I promise to do with your support is to take this new graphical legal representation, new graphical legal technology, you could say, take this representation to specifically to historically black colleges and universities, and to there find a professor or a group of professors who work with members of the community, who work with victim advocacy groups or community advocacy groups, and see how these graphical representations can be integrated into pamphlets, brochures, or other sources of information, or in the way that counselors talk to victims, in the way that the victims gain a basic legal education and are encouraged to press forward with the assurance of their rights, and therefore lead to benefits to the victims from the bottom up, with giving the victim a certainty that what crime has been committed upon them and what elements constitute the crime, and therefore clearing up this uncertainty that victims often have as to what has happened, and what legal remedies are available. So the idea is this is a journey of discovery. I don't know exactly what professors I will contact and what community organizers I will contact, but the idea is that with your generous funding, I can go to these locations with the historically black colleges and universities, and find people who are interested in this new type of legal knowledge representation, and then put it right to work for the benefits of people, specifically victims' rights groups, the victims themselves, and community advocacy groups. And I will look to meet as much as possible within the time of the visits with as many groups as possible, and try to get this new legal knowledge representation implemented for the benefit of people. Thank you for your support.